Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking closely at Selenium, a tool that's become really essential for testing web applications. We've got this excerpt from a technical article all queued up, and our mission is to kind of like figure out how Selenium works, why it's so important in software development, and you know what its limitations are.
What's so fascinating about Selenium is how it's shifted the landscape of software testing. Like before Selenium testing, a web application across multiple browsers could take weeks, involving like a whole team manually clicking through every scenario. Now with Selenium, a lot of this can be automated, saving a huge amount of time and effort.
That's a great point. But before we get too deep into Selenium, let's take a step back for a second. Could you remind us why software testing is so crucial in the first place?
Absolutely. At its core, software testing is about catching those hidden bugs before they reach the user. Imagine launching this like shiny new web app only to discover it crashes every time someone tries to use a specific feature. Testing helps to ensure that the software works as intended, meets all the requirements, and ultimately delivers a smooth and reliable experience for the user. And as web applications become increasingly complex, automated testing tools like Selenium have become basically indispensable.
So Selenium is like our automated bug catcher. I like it. But how did it even come about? The name Selenium seems a bit random for a software testing tool.
Well, there's actually a really interesting story behind the name. You see, before Selenium, there was this dominant testing tool called Mercury. But Mercury had its own set of issues, and the creators of Selenium wanted to create a tool that could, in a way, counteract those problems.
Hold on, are we talking about mercury like the element? The one that's toxic?
Exactly. Selenium, as you might know, is a mineral that can actually counteract the toxic effects of mercury. And the name was strategically chosen to reflect this idea. The creators of Selenium envisioned a tool that was more effective, accessible, and less toxic than its predecessor.
Wow, I never knew that. It's like a tech history lesson and a chemistry lesson all rolled into one. But how does the Selenium actually work? It sounds pretty technical.
It does involve some technical components, but the core idea is fairly straightforward. Imagine you're ordering food at a restaurant. You, the client, tell the waiter, the server, what you want, and the kitchen, the browser, prepares it. Selenium works in a similar way.
Okay, I'm following so far. So I'm the client, Selenium is the waiter, and the web browser is the kitchen. But what am I ordering in this scenario?
You're ordering a series of actions for the browser to perform. These actions are written in a test script using Selenium WebDriver. The script might include instructions like clicking a button, filling out a form, or navigating to a specific page.
So the test script is like my order, and Selenium WebDriver is the language I use to communicate with the waiter.
Precisely. Selenium WebDriver acts as a bridge between your test script and the browser. It takes your instructions and translates them into actions that the browser can understand and execute.
That makes sense. But I've heard there's more to Selenium than just WebDriver. Something about Selenium Grid.
You're right, Selenium Grid takes things to a whole new level by enabling parallel testing. Let's say you want to test your web application on different browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, and across different operating systems. Traditionally, this would require setting up multiple machines and running the tests sequentially, which could take a long time.
Yeah, that sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be, but with Selenium Grid, you can set up a network of machines, and it will distribute your tests across these machines, allowing them to run simultaneously. This dramatically speeds up the testing process and gives you faster feedback on how your application performs in different environments.
So instead of one waiter running back and forth between me and the kitchen, I've got a whole team of waiters working in parallel.
That's a great analogy. Selenium Grid essentially orchestrates a team of Selenium instances to execute your tests in parallel, saving you tons of time and effort.
Okay, so we've got Selenium WebDriver for writing the test scripts and Selenium Grid for running them in parallel across different environments. But what about people who are just starting out with Selenium? Is there a more user-friendly option?
Absolutely. That's where Selenium IDE comes in. Think of it as a simplified interface for creating basic test scripts without having to write any code.
So if I'm not a coding whiz, Selenium IDE is a good place to start.
Exactly. It's a Firefox plugin that allows you to record your interactions with a web application like clicking buttons and filling forms. Selenium IDE then converts those actions into a test script that you can replay and modify.
So it's kind of like a record and replay feature for testing. That sounds pretty handy for getting a feel for how Selenium works.
It is. And once you're comfortable with the basics, you can move on to Selenium WebDriver for more complex and customized tests. But even with Selenium IDE, You can get a lot done without having to dive deep into coding.
This is all starting to make sense. So we've got Selenium IDE for beginners, Selenium WebDriver for more advanced scripting, and Selenium Grid for running those tests in parallel. It's like a whole ecosystem of tools.
That's a great way to put it. Selenium provides a versatile toolkit to address a wide range of testing needs.
Now that we've got a good grasp of the basic components, let's dive a little deeper into how to actually use Selenium effectively. What are some key things I should consider when creating and running these Selenium tests?
One of the most important aspects is test script development. It's not just about automating actions. It's about creating robust and reliable tests that accurately reflect how users interact with your application.
So it's not just about pointing Selenium at my web app and hitting record.
Not quite. It requires careful planning and a deep understanding of your application's functionality and user workflows. You need to think about different scenarios, edge cases, and potential areas where things could go wrong.
That makes sense. But where do I even begin? What are the steps involved in crafting a solid Selenium test script?
First, you need to define your test scenarios. What specific aspects of your application do you want to test? For example, do you want to test the login process, the checkout flow, or the search functionality? Once you have a clear idea of what you want to test, you need to break down those scenarios into smaller steps.
Okay, so I'm essentially creating a step-by-step guide for Selenium to follow.
Precisely. And for each step, you'll need to identify the web elements that Selenium needs to interact with. This might involve using element IDs, CSS selectors, or XPaths to locate specific buttons, fields, or other elements on the page.
That sounds like it could get pretty technical. Is there a way to make this process easier?
There are definitely tools and techniques that can help. For example, most modern browsers have developer tools that allow you to inspect the HTML structure of a web page and easily find the locators for specific elements.
So I can use the browser's own tools to help me write my Selenium scripts. That's handy. But once I've identified those elements, what's next?
The next step is to incorporate validation techniques. This is how you ensure that your application is behaving as expected. For instance, if you're testing a login form, you'd want to verify that the user is redirected to the correct page after entering valid credentials.
So validation is all about making sure Selenium is seeing what it's supposed to see.
Exactly. You're essentially setting up checkpoints within your test script to confirm that the application is responding correctly to each action. This might involve checking the text on a page, verifying that a specific element is displayed, or confirming that the URL is correct.
This all sounds incredibly detailed. Is there anything else I need to be mindful of when crafting these Selenium scripts?
Two crucial aspects are synchronization and error handling. Synchronization ensures that your test script and the web application are in sync. You see, web applications are dynamic and elements take time to load, and sometimes actions happen asynchronously.
I'm picturing those annoying times when I try to click a button on a website, but it's not quite loaded yet and nothing happens.
That's a perfect example. Without proper synchronization, your Selenium script might try to interact with an element that's not yet available, leading to test failures. Selenium provides mechanisms to wait for specific elements to load or for certain conditions to be met before proceeding with the next step in the script. This ensures that your tests are reliable and don't fail due to timing issues.
Synchronization is like adding a bit of patience to my Selenium scripts, making sure they don't jump the gun. What about error handling? Is that about anticipating those oops moments?
Precisely. No matter how well you plan your test scripts, unexpected events can always occur. A network connection might drop, a pop-up might appear, or an element might behave differently than you anticipated. Robust error handling ensures that your tests don't completely crash when these unexpected events happen.
So error handling is like adding a safety net to my Selenium scripts, preventing them from falling apart when something unexpected happens.
That's a great way to think about it. It allows your test to gracefully handle these situations, log relevant information for debugging, and perhaps even attempt to recover and continue running. This makes your test more resilient and provides valuable insights into potential issues with your application.
This is all really helpful. So we've covered test script development, synchronization, and error handling. Are there any other key considerations when using Selenium?
We've talked about how Selenium Grid helps speed up testing by running tests in parallel. But even with careful planning and well-written scripts, managing all those tests can become quite complex. This is where integrating Selenium with test automation frameworks comes in.
Okay, so this is where we level up our testing game even further. What exactly are these test automation frameworks?
Think of them as toolboxes that provide additional features and structure to help you manage and organize your tests. Popular frameworks like JUnit and TestNG offer features like test case management reporting and assertions.
I'm guessing these frameworks help keep things organized when you have a lot of tests to juggle.
Exactly. Test case management features help you group and categorize your tests, making them easier to manage and maintain. Reporting features provide detailed logs and summaries of your test runs, allowing you to track progress, identify failures, and analyze results more effectively.
So it's like having a dashboard for my Selenium tests, giving me a clear overview of what's working and what's not.
That's a great analogy. And assertions are a powerful feature that allows you to verify specific conditions within your test scripts. For example, you can use assertions to confirm that the text on a page matches a specific value or that a certain element is present.
So assertions are like adding extra checks and balances within my Selenium tests, making sure everything is aligned with what I expect.
You got it. They provide a way to programmatically validate the behavior of your application, making your tests more robust and reliable. And when integrated with a test automation framework, these assertions can be seamlessly integrated into your test reports, giving you a comprehensive view of your testing results.
This is all making me realize that there's a lot more to Selenium than meets the eye. It's not just about automating actions, it's about building a comprehensive testing infrastructure that's reliable, efficient, and insightful.
That's a great observation. And speaking of insights, let's not forget the power of the Selenium community.
Oh yes, the community. Every time I've dabbled with Selenium, I've been amazed by the wealth of resources and support available online.
The Selenium community is incredibly active and supportive. You'll find forums, online communities, documentation tutorials, and even conferences dedicated to Selenium. It's a fantastic resource for learning troubleshooting and connecting with other Selenium enthusiasts.
It's like having a global team of Selenium experts at your fingertips. But before we get too carried away with all the amazing things Selenium can do, we need to address the elephant in the room, or should I say the Selenium in the room. What are its limitations?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that Selenium is primarily designed for testing web applications. While there are ways to extend it for testing desktop or mobile apps, it's not really its core strength.
So if I'm working on a mobile app, I might need to explore other testing tools alongside Selenium.
That's a good approach. Selenium's real power lies in web application testing.
Okay, that makes sense. Are there other limitations? What about security?
Security is always a concern, and Selenium does have some limitations in this area. Browsers have these built-in security measures to prevent scripts from one domain from accessing data on another domain. This is known as the same origin policy, and it can sometimes pose challenges when using Selenium for testing applications that interact with multiple domains.
So if my web app needs to pull data from different sources, it could throw a wrench in my Selenium tests.
It's something to be aware of. There are workarounds and techniques for dealing with cross-domain security restrictions, but it does add complexity to your testing setup.
Got it. So security is something to keep in mind. What about maintenance? We've talked about how web applications are constantly evolving. Does that make it difficult to keep my Selenium tests up to date?
That's another valid concern. As web applications change, your Selenium tests might break if they rely on elements or functionality that have been modified or removed. Maintaining those tests can be a significant effort, especially for large and complex applications.
So it's like a never-ending race to keep my Selenium tests in sync with the latest version of my app.
In a way, yes. It's important to factor in test maintenance as part of your overall testing strategy. You'll need to allocate time and resources for updating and refactoring your tests as your application evolves.
Okay, starting to see that while Selenium is a powerful tool, it's not a magic bullet. It requires careful planning, ongoing maintenance, and a deep understanding of your application and testing methodologies. What about reporting? Can Selenium generate those fancy reports that managers love?
While Selenium itself doesn't come with built-in reporting features, it can generate logs and output data that you can use to create reports. And as we discussed earlier, integrating Selenium with test automation frameworks like JUnit or TestNG can provide more robust reporting capabilities.
So I might need to put in some extra effort or use third-party tools if I want those visually appealing reports with charts and graphs?
That's often the case. But even simple logs and output data can provide valuable insights into the results of your Selenium tests.
Right. Data is only as good as the insights you can derive from it. What about browser compatibility? Is it a smooth sailing experience across all browsers?
Selenium strives to support a wide range of browsers, but browser compatibility can be a bit of a moving target. New browser versions are released frequently, and Selenium needs to adapt to those changes.
So I might run into issues if I'm using an older version of Selenium with a newer browser version.
It's possible. It's essential to keep your Selenium WebDriver up to date to ensure compatibility with the browsers you need to test on.
Noted. Keeping everything up to date seems to be a recurring theme here. What about performance testing? We haven't really talked about that yet. Can I use Selenium to measure things like page load times?
Selenium is primarily designed for functional testing, verifying that your application behaves as expected. You can certainly use it to gather some basic performance metrics like page load times, but it's not a dedicated performance testing tool.
So for more in-depth performance testing, I'd need to look at other specialized tools.
That's a good idea. There are tools specifically designed for performance testing that provide more comprehensive insights and analysis.
I'm realizing that selecting the right testing tools is a bit like assembling a toolkit. You need the right tool for the right job. Speaking of the right tools, how much coding expertise do I need to effectively use Selenium?
While there are user-friendly options like Selenium IDE for beginners to really unlock Selenium's power and flexibility, you'll need a solid understanding of programming concepts and the programming language you choose to use with Selenium WebDriver.
So if I'm completely new to programming, I might want to brush up on my coding skills before diving deep into Selenium.
That would be beneficial. There are plenty of online resources and tutorials available to help you get started with programming. Once you have a basic grasp of programming fundamentals, you'll be in a better position to leverage Selenium's full potential.
Got it. Selenium is powerful, but requires some technical chops to wield effectively. It's not just about recording actions, it's about writing code, handling errors, and understanding how web applications work. What about speed? Is Selenium testing always faster than manual testing?
That's a great question. While automated tests can execute much faster than a human, especially when running them in parallel with Selenium Grid, there's still the overhead of setting up the tasks, writing the scripts, and analyzing the results. For very simple scenarios, manual testing might actually be quicker.
So it's not always a race against the clock. It's about choosing the right approach for the situation. This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground today, from Selenium's origins and its core components to its strengths and limitations. What key takeaways should our listeners walk away with?
Selenium is a game changer for testing web applications. Its ability to automate complex interactions, run tests across different browsers and environments, and integrate with other testing tools makes it an invaluable asset for any development team.
And let's not forget the fascinating story behind its name, a deliberate choice to create a more effective and less toxic alternative to the then dominant testing tool, Mercury.
Absolutely. But it's crucial to remember that Selenium, like any tool, has its limitations. Understanding those limitations is key to using it effectively.
So Selenium is powerful but not perfect. It requires thoughtful planning, ongoing maintenance, and a willingness to adapt as web applications evolve. What final thought would you leave our listeners with as they embark on their own Selenium journeys?
As web applications continue to evolve, incorporating technologies like AI and machine learning, the demands on testing tools will only increase. It's an exciting time to be involved in software testing, and tools like Selenium will continue to play a vital role in ensuring the quality and reliability of the applications we depend on.
It sounds like the future of testing is full of challenges and opportunities. I'm sure some of our listeners are already thinking about how they can leverage Selenium to test the next generation of web applications. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Selenium.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you and your listeners.
Until next time, keep those tests running smoothly and those web applications bug-free.